Okay, I think we are live now. Hello, Sergio. Hello, Inka.
Hey,
What's going on?
what's going on?
Well, I hope technology works and we are live on Facebook and recording. First time our webinar. Ninth time we're coming together for our emotional trauma chat, and this is the first time live on Facebook.
It's exciting. We're moving up. We're evolving.
Yes, we do.
Um, how are you guys? Before we start, I just want to say, thank you, and it's always a pleasure talking to you guys and working with you guys, and you know. But how's everyone doing?
Same here. Thank you very much, Sergio. I'm doing very, very good. I'm very excited for our live webinar. And yeah, how about you, Inka?
Yeah, I'm great, and I really appreciate the forethought that you've had, Sergio, and figure out some interesting questions that might be something that people actually are asking themselves when it comes to this kind of problems that we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had the idea to ask people on Reddit. There's quite a lot of channels, subreddits. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Reddit, but a lot of like it's like a community of just any kind of topic, and within that community, there's something called subreddits, and so you can have subreddits on like mountain biking or tennis or Germany, and people will post like videos, questions, etc. I happened to find one that I thought was pretty pertinent. I think it's pretty important. It was emotional abuse. And I just decided to ask them, since we've been talking from a perspective of people who are dealing with issues but maybe are not, kind of aware of what they can do about it outside of, you know, reframing their perspective a little bit and, um, you know, reading, kind of educating themselves. And I was shocked that I posted it last night and I woke up and yeah, I mean, there was a lot of questions and there were good questions from the emotional abuse side of after the after effects, they're trying to get better, from the political side of therapy and how it's supposed to be growing. And um I thought they were better than my questions. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to just, you know, start from there if that's something that it's okay with you guys.
That sounds great. Yes, let's do
Yeah.
it.
Okay, well let's go through them. Let's go through them one at a time. Okay. So I asked like, are there any questions that you guys may be wanting to know about healing, trauma, relationships, leaving old wounds behind that still affect you? Um, and let's just get started. Let's go with the very first one, which is a good one. How does emotional abuse affect the ability to connect again to people, trust, etc.? So, I think they're not using the word trauma, but I think it'd be interesting to tackle it from both a more impersonal side, just emotional abuse itself, how it's spoken, and then maybe the biology or the mechanisms underneath that are what trauma is, and how they play out in that specific dynamic, which is not feeling like you can trust people. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so let me think a little bit how to approach this so that people can grasp what this is about without having read a lot of our work here.
While you do that, Inka, let me just read what Psychology Today writes about emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is a pattern of behavior in which the perpetrator insults, humiliates, and generally instills fear in an individual in order to control them. the individual's reality may become distorted as they internalize the abuse as their own feelings. Their failings, sorry.
Failings. Okay.
Failings, yes.
Yeah, it's really a constellation that I think, coming from a trauma perspective, trauma, as we understand it, has its origin in very, very early developmental moments. So, first of all, this is nobody's fault of how they react and how their perspective is. It just was set up that way. And the good news is that you can go back to those moments and heal them. So you don't have to deal with what happened with the actual perpetrator, or you just need to find the feelings that made you susceptible to this constellation in the first place and heal them. Yeah, and when I say heal, then I mean go to that moment and repeat the development in such a way that you come out with a better setup or better system that can deal better with this kind of situations.
Right.
So basically, Inge, you're saying you can heal emotions, you can heal trauma, and in the definition it said that a perpetrator insults, humiliates, and generally instills fear. So one way to escape emotional abuse, as I understood you correctly, is to just heal that fear, so the perpetrator cannot instill that inside in with you, and therefore you become sort of immune to that emotional abuse. Is that correct?
Yes, I wouldn't quite start with the fear. I would rather start with, why do you believe in them in the first place? Why do you let that inside you and believe that what this person says has anything to do with your abilities?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem of that dynamic, and that's the problem why you don't kick this person to the curb. Usually you're in that relationship voluntarily. Nobody's tying you down there. You stay there and you allow that person to treat you in a way that is a healthy person, or let me be a bit more, I'm not judgmental here, just somebody who has got the proper setup to deal with this kind of situation. They just wouldn't allow that. Like the first sign of this, and they would say, you know what, not with me.
Well, it's like you're saying, at the beginning you said it's not anyone's fault, and I think the reason you're saying that is because, to an extent, these are subconscious dynamics that occur due to trauma, right? So
Right,
these
right.
are
And
these beliefs that form, these perspectives that we see, these lenses that we see. Your emotional abuse will kind of cause this distortion where what we see, what we end up seeing through the world, is really this distortion about ourselves. So, like, well, I must be a piece of crap if I'm being treated like crap. So therefore, a lot of things happen. And I think that's super important to state, that it's coming from a developmental perspective. However, I want to say one thing specifically with the way this question was phrased. Let's say this person was relatively stable, hypothetically speaking. They trusted. It seems like this person trusted before this emotional abuse, right? So maybe they grew up, maybe they did have this kind of already predisposition to let these kind of abuses in, so to speak. Um, and then something happened where they met somebody who was very abusive. They fell into this dynamic, which is something you see a lot online. You see a lot of people talking about narcissism a lot, right? And then they escape these relationships and they don't trust anymore, or they've been gaslighted. That's a common word that people in general know about this word now, gaslighting, and it's used a lot. Um, so this person was relatively stable for most part of their lives, and then they met this person, and then stuff happened, emotional abuse happened, and then they weren't. So if you were to omit that idea of developmental trauma, not because it's not important, but if you were to look at it from just a biographical perspective alone, what do you think is happening there that makes somebody distrust people in general from a trauma perspective? Is it not like, can we not see it through a just biographical perspective? Do we have to go back to developmental?
Yeah, I'm afraid so. Yeah,
Well,
No.
this is essentially is a codependency that is set up. Again, you're the person who has become the victim of this. Nobody forced them to stay. Yeah, they believed that they had no choice or they had to endure or whatever,
Mhm.
and they just have that setup that they would engage in that kind of codependency, even though that wasn't obvious before in their lives. But sometimes when conditions are just happening that trigger that early trauma, that's what's coming up.
Okay. Okay. That
so
is,
so Sergio, I think the thing is when we look at from the biographical perspective, then exactly this comes up. So there's an codependence, there's an interaction, okay, and to resolve that interaction, one could try to find blame and say this was bad habit and this is a bad thing, and there he insulted me or she humiliated me, and so on, and putting blame. But this just adds to the complex situation. And just if you
yeah.
want to resolve that situation, you just go back and you ask, why have you been listening to that person in the first place? Why is it important that somebody says you are this and this, and you believe him or her? Okay,
Yeah.
this why usually leads to some sort of feelings of insecurity or of fear of being alone, or fear of being separated, or some sort of strong emotions which people usually don't talk about. There's very ugly emotions, and we try to avoid them. And when you have the right tools and you go back to that first developmental event, it's actually not that strong anymore. So when we always
Mhm.
use a SATS rating from 0, nothing, to 10, the most horrible thing that can happen. And usually in our lives, it's if we talk about it, if we notice, it's always above a 5. So it's a 6, 7, 8, 9, or sometimes even a 10. But if we go back to that developmental event, it might just be a 2 or 3. So it might be easier to deal with.
Yeah. So, okay.
So
It
so you
almost,
you can find all kinds of ideas to cognitively cope with the problem
yeah.
that you feel is real. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And in your reality, that's the case. But there are other realities. And one reality is if you had the basic outfit system
Yeah.
that allows you to set healthy boundaries, you would not get into that situation,
Okay, that's a
right?
trip. Yeah. So what you're saying is essentially like somebody falls into an abusive relationship maybe in their 20s, right? Um and in this scenario, this is actually enough to take somebody into a dynamic where they don't trust people anymore. It wasn't like that before. But what you're actually also saying is, before these two people met and this abusive relationship was created, and somebody was being abused, the stage was already set. So that person was more prone to get into an abusive relationship because these, um, I guess, dynamics were already in place because there was already some sort of trauma that was gonna make it
Right,
easier.
right.
Okay, that makes sense. It's almost like, uh, the best way I can put it is when people, and I think this is because I'm just getting it now when you're talking about it, is when sometimes we talk about people who have like mommy issues and daddy issues, and you're talking about a dynamic that was before, right? And then it plays out in the future with I don't know, another relationship. Um, you're talking about how that was going to happen because there was an earlier issue already that was gonna trigger, for whatever reason, you were more attracted to that relationship, whether it was good for you or bad for you. Okay,
Yeah. Some
that's
people actually
interesting.
have it even as a set point. Love is if somebody doesn't treat me well.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And we talked about this, right? I don't know if this
Yeah.
falls into the conditioning, into body association stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly. Yeah. And
yeah,
that sort of thing is under the heading of looking for love in all the wrong places. Yeah.
that's a great song. Uh, yeah, that's super interesting. And I feel like I'm gonna be posting this later on for this person to watch, and I hope they do watch it. But I feel like for anybody reading this, it's almost like a punch in the gut because it's like, wait, so this like was more likely to happen to me, um, and it sucks. And there's something to say to that we all have these unconscious responses, and there's a lot of unconscious dynamics happening with people that we might not even know about sometimes. And it's important to know that they can sometimes happen because of trauma, right? Sometimes people end up being friends or in relationships with other people because that other person fits or helps fill a hole that they may have, right? Like the shy person with the like super outgoing person, or the person who can't stand up with the person who like is super outspoken, stuff like that. Um, and I wonder, like, do you guys see it like that too? That it's a response to trauma. Like you're not very outspoken because something traumatic happened, so you try to meet that demand with somebody who might help you in those deficiencies you might have.
Well, that's taken it a bit far, and
Okay.
I don't want to stigmatize either side of these two extremes. It may
Hmm.
just be that they're a good combination that they can, like, if they like that in the other. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
That's good to know, and that's a good. I
And
mean,
and
I
and and, and the and the liking may just be something subconscious there, and I think we talked about that in one of our previous chats as well. That there's this sort of chemistry or attraction, what somebody feels when they meet the other partner or the going to be partner, and that's basically our subconscious saying, I want more, I want more. This feels the way how it felt before, but it's not necessarily a healthy feeling. So the chemistry and the attraction not necessarily is helpful for creating a healthy
Yeah.
long-term relationship, but it
right.
creates short-term, very emotional relationship, and
Hmm.
usually it just feeds on our traumas.
Yeah, yeah, we've talked
Yeah.
about that as well.
Yeah. A lot of that chemistry thing has to do with that. Yeah. Not necessarily all, but a lot.
But okay. Well, that's good to know. Okay, let's move on to the second question. And I feel like some of the answers are they're going to be about the same thing, but I think it's important to discuss them regardless. Second question from you know what? I won't say names. How do you avoid sabotaging future relationships because of the abuse? And I think the answer is pretty straightforward, right? I know what you guys are gonna say. You
Yeah.
you
Well,
heal the trauma.
Feel the
exactly.
trauma, do the work, and be calm, peaceful, and light, and enjoy life.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's important to say this, right?
And
So
the good news is that this is empowering. Yeah. This means
And it's
that
possible.
I'm not a victim of life and I have to go through life like that and I just can't get anything better. No, you can actually really leave that behind.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. And so again, for people who might not understand this, or be confused, like, what do you mean? You feel really crappy about something that happened to you, right? And you still hold on to it. You hold on to that mistrust. You hold on to whatever feelings you happen in that relationship, the fear, the doubts, whatever. And then you go ahead and you let that go with what you guys do, which is a form of power therapy, right? A trauma technique, or in this case, um, you know, uh, what are the names for the techniques you guys use?
So these techniques, or what we're talking about right now, is comes from the Institute for the Study of Peak States. Like some 25, 30 years ago, they started researching trauma on the path of wanting to find higher states of consciousness, of feeling really good and having special abilities and so on. And the discovery was made that trauma is actually blocking these states of consciousness, and that there are techniques to resolve these traumas gently, without any medication, without no drugs, no medication, no invasive procedures. And most of the time it's just tapping on one's point, that's it, and some visualization, sometimes some music there, and that's guided by a therapist. Okay, there's a training program so for people to learn these techniques and become therapists, and then therapists help people to overcome their issues. And the most important thing from the institute's point of view is trauma is not necessarily some big war, rape, accident, or something like this event that happens, but the institute defines trauma as everything that doesn't feel calm, peaceful, and emotionally light. That's a little bit difficult for some people to understand, because it's most of humanity doesn't feel calm, peaceful, and emotionally light, or the abbreviation is CPL. That's unknown. So the first time when these techniques are applied, that's really like a mini vacation. What's happening there when you're through and you have that CPL feeling, and once you've experienced it, usually you say, "Oh, wow, I can feel this way," and then you're hooked and you continue that way, and want to get off these things off your chest and enjoy life in a different way.
Yeah.
Maybe I can just quickly elaborate on something here. So you need to differentiate between the origin of the trauma
Mm-hmm.
and the consequences, or the way the emotional problems that occur later in life due to that early event where the actual cause of the trauma is there. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So when you are emotionally upset, that does not mean that you are experiencing trauma as something that's happening newly, as something that's being set in that moment.
Yeah.
But it's rather something that gets triggered from past stuff. Yeah.
Right.
So that past event kind of like echoes into the present time, and anytime conditions remind you or remind your system of that past event, you react with that, oh, something didn't go right, help. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think that's the most interesting thing that most people. I think that's a good starting point for most people. Whether they're in a place where they can't do much or they don't understand what's going on. That's an interesting way of looking at it, and a perspective that people can start like implementing immediately. Which is, yeah, like if I feel a certain way about something that's really affecting me, like what's going on is something happened way earlier, and it's just it feels like it's the present, but it's not the present. It's
Exactly.
you're being triggered, right?
Yeah.
That's the word that people use a lot, and I think it's a great word for that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's perfect. Okay, question number 3. Um, Not really a question, but rather a wish of more awareness and understanding of emotional abuse, legal abuse, financial abuse, physical abuse, other types of abuse, manipulation, high conflict personalities, and all of that. In general, public, psychology, police, and other law enforcement, court, and lawyers. So I guess the questions are, why isn't it being studied as a mandatory subject when one is to become a psychologist, psychotherapist, counsel, lawyer, judge? And why is there no awareness in general public on emotional abuse and all the topics related to it, like manipulation and smearing? So it's 2 questions really. First one, okay. So why is there such little awareness, and why isn't it an important piece of studying when you're learning to be a therapist, all these aspects, right, of emotional abuse? And I think it makes sense because I think what this person might be trying to say, I could be totally wrong, but we see a lot of cases where this happens and it gets away. I think I'm gonna go with this. A perfect example is the I don't know if you guys are aware of like the Britney Spears going on in the USA. Do you guys know who Britney Spears is?
Um, yeah, I think my daughter used to be a fan of her.
She was this big pop star, like big pop star.
Yes.
And I think she a few years ago she is basically under custody of her parents, and she's super rich. And she basically had her rights taken away because something happened. I do not know the story, but she lost basically her rights to herself. So any kind of thing she wants to do, she has to go through her parents. And after 10 years, she's been to the court a couple times about all the emotional abuse that has been happening, the way they treat her, a lot of just awful things. And this is the second time I believe that she's been on the courts, and it's nothing's really happening yet. Um, and I think that speaks to the idea that there's so much awareness to it, but there's a big disconnect between, you know, there's so much that you can bring awareness to it, but there's so much that is actually happening within the legal field. Because when you hear these things, there's a big disconnect between what somebody's telling you and I guess how it must feel for that person. You can't really know how somebody's feeling, and I feel like right there is a big disconnect between how we see emotional abuse and how we talk about emotional abuse. Does that make sense?
Well, it's a difficult topic, especially the why. That's something I don't know. I'm no scientist in sociology or something like this of why they develop. I have some theories. I can share my theories on that. And one of my theories is that, especially in our Western world, we are very mind-based or head-based. Okay, we try to understand everything with the mind, and everything needs to be put in laws and regulation and standard operating procedures and so on. And emotions aren't that logical. Okay, there is some logic behind how emotions work and how they come from when you really dig into it,
Mhm.
but still it's not something you can so well predict with a rational mind if you're not skilled and if you're not trained in that field and if you don't have so much experience. And still then stuff comes up, and sometimes you just have to observe and you can't really predict. And with all these rules, we try to predict our future, we try to make our future safer. And so I think that a big disconnect between the emotional world, where emotional abuse can happen or trauma happens, and our everyday life, is that we basically shut them off. We try to not, and we try to find everything okay, and do everything by the book, and try to judge everything by what we see, what we can touch in materialistic world. And but life isn't like that. At least from my
Yeah.
perspective, life is different. In life, we have emotions as well, and so that's why basically for many things in our world, just half of life is perceived, because this other half is either in the subconscious, we can't access it, okay, because we basically put it there and we don't want to see it,
Hmm.
or because people are not aware that there's something like this. I mean, even the concept that there's something going on inside of you which you don't control, for most people is something like that. What? No, I control everything. And I say, okay,
Yeah.
how much milliliter bile did your liver secrete today? Oh no, they say usually. I don't know about that. So yeah, but still, that's stuff happening inside of you. So it's still
Yeah.
you. That's what's happening. So you can't control everything. And so we somehow try to not see what's happening on these emotional levels,
Yeah.
and that's also very scary if you don't have tools, okay, and you You know, if you deal with something emotional with another person, you don't have the tools, then you might get triggered yourself. So if a policeman would really be so empathic and still has some skeletons in his own closet, so he might just wake them up and then be haunted by them as well, and he has no ways to deal with these emotions. So I think that's why many people, and that might not be the only reason, but many people try to put them all away, stuff them somewhere away, put them swipe them under the rug, and just deal with the facts, and that's it.
Yeah.
And well, that's just half life, or perhaps just a third of life or quarter of life. Regarding psychotherapists, I'm not sure that they are not aware. I wouldn't say that. I have met many colleagues who are aware of emotional abuse and who are aware of all this goings on, but again, to a certain degree, they are also humans and they also have skeletons in their closet. And while they were in their apprentice phase, or while they were getting trained for being a psychotherapist, have not dealt with these, then there are also some defensive mechanism in those people.
Right. And
Does
we
that make
are
sense?
pretty, yeah. And I mean, yes, I think you nailed it for sure with the, I don't disagree with anything you said, but I completely like know what you're saying with the Western perspective and how heady we are and how, I mean, humans have a huge capacity to stuff things down and to push things down and to not deal with them if they don't want to. And now we have even more. I mean, as technology grows, we have more mechanisms. For God's sakes, we got virtual reality now. So have you used one of those things? They're incredible. Like, and I saw a video of one of the main guys who created. I don't know if it was Oculus or something, and they asked him like why he created it, and it was because he didn't want to deal with this world. So I mean, it's not shocking, but yeah. Before I say anything
But
else, did you?
actually, there's a movie about that as well. I think it's a
Oh,
little bit
Ready
older
Player
now.
One.
I don't know about that one, but it's called 13th Floor. So there's a simulation. It's an awesome movie. But
Huh?
it's a little bit older.
No, I haven't seen it.
13th Floor, yeah.
I'll check it out.
Player One, I don't know. Tell me about Player One.
Player One is not necessarily escapist. It's just like what the world will maybe look like in the future with the growth of virtual reality and video games mostly, and how that will affect the economy. But everybody lives there because economically speaking, that's how they make money. So it is interesting. But before I say anything else, Inca, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was kind of like going back to that situation that you painted with the Britney Spears scenario. First of all, once somebody has their rights taken away like that, I think at least the Western countries that I know have a very clear procedure under which condition that is even possible, because our rights as individuals normally are well protected. So now you have somebody who's basically stigmatized that they already have mental health issues.
Yeah.
And then that person goes and litigates against the parents, the caretakers. That is not an easy situation for anybody to judge. Does that even have any merit, or is that just part of the mental health condition of that person?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that really needs experts to look into it, and I'm not sure that courts are really well fitted out for that sort of procedure.
No. And I
Yeah.
think from a social perspective, I mean, it's a sad truth, but like I think a big reason for the stigma of mental health is that, especially in a case like Britney Spears, the perspective of the world is that it's almost like you lose some sort of power. And I think a great example is Britney Spears because she's stigmatized. She has mental, like she might have had mental issues, and from her perspective alone, just like the way her life is in Hollywood is, and that, like it's enough to drive anyone crazy, and she's not the first one. So I think it's you see it a lot. So for I think it was a tool. You know, this it became a tool for power to have an upper hand on someone's money and just power over them, right? And their resources in a way as well. And so it's kind of a shame to see that mental health can also be used as a way to take somebody's internal power, their empowerment, who they are, and to cast them as lower people than others. And this is an example where I see it a little bit.
Well, okay, they shouldn't be seen as lower.
Yeah, of course, of course.
But you have to take it with a grain of salt what they're telling you, because they have a track record. That's the problem
Sure.
here. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So, and then the other side is, of course, that those people who abuse, who take the power, who control others, do not forget that that is also coming from a place of power, of trauma. Yeah.
What they're doing
And-
is coming
and-
from
Yeah, what they're doing, they're just not in the suffering. They just empower
Yeah.
themselves and they just roll over everybody else. It's also trauma based, but they're usually finding that way of coping with it satisfactorily, and they don't feel that they need to heal something.
Right.
That's true.
And sometimes this comes from a place of lack of self confidence and so on, and then we just overcompensate. And sometimes this is even very subconscious, so they're not aware of it, even when somebody tells them, because their mental filters are set up in a way they cannot yet perceive it. So there will be events possibly in their lives to make them aware,
Yeah.
okay, that one day will happen, but it comes from trauma.
That's the other side of the coin, right? There's the sufferers, and then those who inflict suffering in terms of when we talk about trauma. And you know, we can think about it also in like, you know, depression, anxiety, lack of trust, you know, PTSD, stuff like that, that people with emotional abuse may suffer from. And then that's the other side. And I would love to hear your thoughts, because you know, when I think about the other side, I'm thinking, you know, narcissism, for example, and that's a big one, because that's one of the questions, you know, how to move past after a narcissistic, dealing with a narcissistic relationship. And you're saying this is trauma based as well, and we've talked about this. You know, there's layers, so you can, and you should, if you can, you should see this as somebody who's hurting people, but you should see this as somebody who's also hurting. And it's very hard, because then people can be like, why are you feeling empathy for them? Why are you da 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 da? And I think it's important to look at it from multiple layers, so that you can, again, have more control. If you want to have more control over your life, that's one way to do it.
Yeah, if you've identified with the victim role, and I'm sorry to say, but what this question, the place where this question is coming from, it sounds a bit like that person is very much identified with the victim role, and like everybody else has to come and help me and do something so that I don't feel so much victimized anymore. But the person themselves often don't feel that it's their job to get out of that place, because it's kind of noble to be the victim, but it's really bad to be the perpetrator.
Yeah, but do you think it's also because that's the one tool they may have? I mean, being in that role also does have its merits, right? You may not be able to fix it, but you can feel kind of good. It's almost like um maybe like an endorphin kind of feeling. Like you get to feel good. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm
Yeah,
just saying it serves
it feels.
a purpose when you don't have maybe something else to move towards to.
Um, and unfortunately, that cements the problem. Yeah, you can say
Hmm.
like, I didn't do anything. I'm just always the poor victim. So at least I'm not the perpetrator. By the way, we call that a projection. Um, but it means that you cement yourself in that stuck place. Yeah. So once you empower yourself to do something about your situation, you get out of that victim role, you take action, you don't get that benefit anymore, but you do have a chance to change your life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that's not always easy because
Oh,
I've personally been there too.
it's very, very hard actually. When we feel like a victim, we just want to perhaps get this other person out of our lives and blame him or her for whatever has happened. And but in a way, that blaming is also a perpetrator. Okay, because that other person did something to you, but does that because this person inside hurts as well. And I just last week had a very, very open conversation with somebody who said he had a narcissistic behavior before he came into psychosis, and he told me about his life. He told me about what basically led up to his psychosis, and yeah, and he felt miserable. This whole life he felt miserable. Okay, though he, from the perspective of other people, was the perpetrator, he himself felt like a victim. And that's the problem with judging and with blaming and so on. It's always a perspective. It's always when I judge, when I blame, it's always from my perspective towards the other. It has nothing to do with empathy. Basically, blaming is the opposite of having empathy, or judging is the opposite of having empathy. And but of course, if I'm hurting, I don't have the capacity to understand the other person. I don't have the capacity to be empathic. And that's why our tools, I just cannot stress it enough, are so simple and easy. You just do the tapping and get you back out of that victim mode, basically. Then you feel empowered, and then you have the capacity to see the other person.
Okay. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
um,
Interesting illustration here. There have been some case studies with battered wives scenarios
mhm,
where the husband actually, usually it's the husband, but because of our role stereotypes, the men being more active, and then also the brain chemistry kind of like plays into this. The male and female brains are operating slightly different. Doesn't mean that all men have a male brain, not all women have a female brain, but the way these brains operate when they're on the female or on the male side are different.
mhm,
And one of the characteristics of the female brain is that they're verbally much more capable of expressing emotions, feelings, whatever. Yeah, everything
mhm,
gets verbalized, puts into words easily. And when you are looking at these scenarios, very often the man felt provoked. Provoking meaning they also hurt. They got hurt by the words. And because the male brain doesn't have the ability to retaliate on the verbal level on that same way, they retaliate in the physical way. Now,
hmm.
I'm not condoning any of this. I'm just showing like the mechanisms behind that. And
Yeah, of
yes,
course.
both sides hurt. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that's so important for people to understand. And I don't think it's very easy. I think there's an internal conflict sometimes because people who hurt do bad things sometimes. They hurt other people. And it's hard to have sympathy for people who do that. And again, we all do that to certain levels. We know no one's perfect, but especially when we're talking about people who are incarcerated and who've done heinous crimes, it's hard to think that how much of that is also trauma based. And I think it's important to talk about that because, you know, like we're not just there's not just like one human. There's a whole society and we all function as a whole whether we know it or not. So I think it's important in general to understand that. Whether you have sympathy or not, you don't need to have sympathy as long as you understand that idea. That's where I stand, at least.
Yeah,
Uh,
not sympathy necessarily, but empathy, because
sure.
like you said, it's all coming from trauma. Not
Yeah.
saying that's an excuse, but it makes it a bit easier to understand, and more importantly, it gives you a handle how to deal with this. You can actually treat this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Very true. This one might fall into the same category, but I don't know if this is more like psychological than the words are more psychological than trauma based. But again, recovering from a narcissistic discard at the end of a long term abusive relationship. So I guess they were dumped. The relationship ended from the narcissistic side. How does one update one's internalized model of the former partner as the idealized source of safety and selfhood in one's unconscious mind? In other words, to get the unconscious material to align with the updated conscious knowledge. My therapist just reads handouts about the stages of grief, which doesn't address the issues at all. If there are any practices that would have been developed to assist this process, I would love to know.
Yes.
Do you know any?
Yes. Body association technique. That's exactly what this is. Is actually a perfect way that the writer of this post actually expressed it. That's exactly what's going on. You have a logical recognition. Yes, that wasn't a good idea. And why do I feel attracted by this person? And why do I feel safe with them, even though very obviously it is not safe? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly the conflict between the mind and the body brain. The body brain thinks in associations, and at some point in development, again, sorry, we had an association between that kind of emotional vibes that somebody sends out,
Yeah.
yeah, and safety. And it was obviously not a very good or servicing association, but it runs your life because your body brain is the most powerful of your awarenesses. Yeah. By the way, just for those people who haven't listened to us before, we have noticed that our consciousness can be divided, or is actually divided in most people, by the various jobs they do for us. Yeah. So our body brain is, maybe some people also know it as the reptilian brain.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one that ensures our survival. It does all our unconscious functioning of our body. And if it sees our survival being threatened, then it takes over the whole show.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have the mind brain also, that's more the analytical and logical thinking. We have the heart brain that is doing all the emotional stuff, together with the limbic system in our head. But there are a couple of others as well, but they all have like their own job descriptions. Ideally, they would work together seamlessly. In most people, they don't.
Right. Why is this? Why do they not work seamlessly?
Huh. You already know the word.
Trauma.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
These parts were supposed to come together in development, but very often they didn't do that
Okay.
perfectly. So you've got all kinds of little hiccups in the system, and that echoes into the present. Yeah.
Got it. Are there any examples of when they function properly, what that may look like, or not? I don't want to say properly and improperly, not because some people
Ideal
might.
or
Yeah,
optimal.
ideal. I don't
Yeah.
want anybody to take offense to anything, be like, oh, that's me. But what does it look like when somebody maybe has some conflicts in their life and they are not, their brains aren't necessarily connected in a ideal way, or in a seamless way? And what are some examples of when somebody might feel like that, like they are?
Okay. Daniel, do you want to say something too? But because I
Yes.
find all these questions so fascinating, I've been talking about
So,
much.
so look like is looking means with the eye. It's a little bit difficult, but for
Yeah.
example, these brains, we the institute has identified 14 of these brains, and as the name said, the institute is for the study of peak states. So one of the main focuses, especially in the early stages of the institute, was or early phases of the institute, was to find out and to map out these stages of human consciousness, how they work. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the very hierarchical stage systems have to do with these consciousnesses. So when they work together, for example, if the mind consciousness and the heart consciousness work together, the mind brain and the heart brain work together, then we have a state which we call inner peace. It's a beautiful state. There's a process which you can book, and then you can achieve that state through tapping, through resolving certain developmental traumas, and then you basically are pretty calm. Okay, you live emotionally in the present moment. You still can go back to and still can experience turmoil which was in the past, and and so there are other peak states. For example, if the heart brain and the body brain come together, that's the underlying happiness state. So in the books you find a lot of these states where we say, okay, when these brains work together, then there's a certain state, a certain feeling, a certain way of living, a certain way of perceiving life differently. And if all of them work together, that's the hollow state. And that's actually a very, very beautiful way to live, because you feel hollow inside, and you just live and everything works seamlessly, basically. So, yeah, okay, that's very good functioning. And some people can achieve that by certain techniques. There's not yet a complete process which we have for the hollow state, but it's possible. It's just a little bit work.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I can just illustrate what happens when these brains are not working well together. Then you have people who are not aware of their emotions, or not aware of their physical sensations, depending on which brain they're in and which brain they're not reaching with their awareness. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can have cases where, for example, the heart brain is damaged in a way that they can't perceive positive feelings or like positive emotions,
Mm-hmm.
or to that extent that they can't perceive emotions at all. Yeah, which is a bit of a sociopathic condition, actually. Yeah.
Gotcha. So do you think that's what's happening with people who tend to be on that side of the spectrum, one
Yeah.
with tendency?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is, if the brains are not connected well and they're not communicating well and they're not functioning well together, and one or two of these brains panic, then the person might show some very weird symptoms. Perhaps that's, I'm not sure about that, but this is something in medicine they call psychosis, because then there's something going on which is not connected to this reality here, and that's a problem. We just got a comment on Facebook to explain a little bit the brains again, and if Sadie, can we take these 2 minutes, 3 minutes?
To explain them?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I actually say something? There's something that actually helped me with one brain a lot, which
Okay.
was the and tell me if it makes sense for you guys, but I used to love this Mexican food place here in San Antonio, and one day, um, we I found out the terrible way that they're actually very unsanitary. So I got this like amazing like quesadilla, or it was like some nachos, I forgot, but it had chicken, and the chicken wasn't well cooked. So I went home after I ate it, and I just like was very sick for the rest. It was New Year's too, so I was sick in bed, like just drinking Gatorade that my mom brought me, and just feeling like it was the worst day of my life. And then once I was feeling better, I wanted to eat at again. That was a place, and I went to eat there, and I thought about it, and I just felt nauseous. Like I just felt terrible. And the way I think about the body brain is that you've in the books you've talked about they communicate in their own way. they have a language, and the language that they have is associations, like Inka was saying. So I think for me, it was like my body was like, if you eat that, you're gonna get sick, and so it associated this nausea with feeling with eating it, right? So that's how it communicated. That's how it told me what was safe or not. And you're saying that the reptilian brain, that's what it does. It protects us. It's fight or flight for the most part. Um, so that's how I think about it, and I think it was a good way of for me to like really crystallizing the idea of how they talk. Does that
Yeah.
does that do you think that works?
Yeah. By the way, it's just the body brain that thinks in that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
With the associations, the other brains have different mechanisms. Um, but yes, so that's basically what happened. Yeah, your body brain got seriously sick, got the message, hey, wait a minute, that place isn't safe.
Hmm.
Let's not go there again. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
And the
It's a
body brain
shame.
doesn't know about and the body brain doesn't know about an owner change or a change in the way of the kitchen change. So the body brain just associates this with that. And then in the future, you might not even want to go there, though it might be different. Okay, and that's the problem with these traumas as well as associations from the body brain. They
Hmm.
help us to stay safe, but on the other hand, they cannot can be very unhelpful if you have something in the future and you can't make yourself do or you are attracted to something because of these associations. Okay,
Yeah.
and circumstances might have changed.
Yeah. I
Like,
do find. Go ahead.
yeah, so we can maybe understand in such a way that we can make healthy associations that protect us,
Yeah.
and we can make unhealthy or nonsensical associations that actually can harm us. Yeah.
Yeah. What I
So
find confusing.
that goes all the way to I have to die to stay alive. Yeah, totally conflicting beliefs, but
Yeah.
the body brain has got it sorted that way.
Is that is that at all an issue of triune brains not being connected also though? Because it sounds like, or is it just the body brain
That's not a
completely?
question of the connection here. That's really just,
Okay.
yeah, like you say, the body brain got its wires crossed somewhere. Yeah.
That's very confusing for me to understand. And when we talk about more common events like between relationships, like like narcissism or these unhealthy relationships people have, maybe you could. Do you think you can give me an example of how you can how can you create a positive feeling towards something bad for you? Like
Oh,
how does that exactly happen? Like somebody, okay, you have, let's say, an abusive father or an abusive mother, a caregiver when you're a child, and they are emotionally abusive. So you grow up and you find, for whatever reason, you're attracted to emotionally abusive partners. Is that because in a way you were safe, you had a home, you were alive,
um,
they kept you alive even though they treated you poorly?
I would say it goes a bit back a bit earlier. Yeah.
Okay.
For example, we know one mechanism goes like this. Um, in utero, some kind of trauma happens.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe mom eats something that is not good, like or smokes or whatever, or there's a serious bump that hits the baby.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens to tug on the cord, whatever. Something happens to threaten survival. Okay.
Yeah.
So when my survival is threatened, I need to be safe. As a baby, I have a program that mom is safe. So I reach out to mom, and mom has, unfortunately for me, a kind of rather unhealthy emotion at that point, maybe anger or hate or something of that sort. So in that moment, the connection gets made between safety is hate.
Okay.
I'm in trauma. I want safety, and safety is my mom, and my mom experiences hate in that moment. Just coincidentally, yeah, that's just the
Yeah.
emotion that's around. It can happen with any other emotion as well.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's the institute says this happens in utero, and there's also some beautiful pictures and even talk about that, about the body associations. And in psychology, we think about when the kid is born too, 7 or 8 years, basically the recording mode is on, and whatever is there is considered as is there, and mom and dad are safe. And so whatever, however they treat me, is a way of what I expect from life. Okay, it's a little
Right.
bit more complicated. There are a little bit more that has to do with the core emotional needs and how they get fulfilled or frustrated, and what strategies the newborn finds to get them satisfied. But basically, what Inka explained is prenatal, and in psychology mostly it's postnatal. What the models, how they are created.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, we are beginning to map these kind of models that have their right of their own, but we try to map that also to developmental events to see if we can, create a seamless model there.
Yeah.
Okay. With a prenatal map.
Well, let's see. Maybe depending on what we're finding with it when we try to explore the chemotherapy and see what's going on in the primary cell. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. I know that this might be a kind of we might lose some people when we talk about this stuff because transpersonal psychology, I think, is the most like established. But I don't. Did we not finish? Did we finish the brain talk?
Yeah,
Or
actually,
No.
I think we just went over it a little bit, and then somebody said they wanted to have a few more details about the brains there.
Yes.
Daniel, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, please. So just let
Right.
me introduce the brains with something, so it's not too crazy what we talk about, because in everyday life we already talk about the brains. So every person, at least I think speaking English and German, knows about the brains, because we have some proverbs like, "Oh, I have to make a big decision, so I have to sleep over it," or something like this, right? That's how it's
Sleep
said.
on it.
Sleep on it, right? Thank you.
Mhm.
And then many people associate thinking with the head, and when they talk about feelings, they talk with the heart. And when they talk about decisions, they talk about gut decisions.
Yeah.
Okay, so these are already words in our language that shows there is something to what we are talking.
Right.
And so these are the three main brains: the mind brain, the heart brain, and the body brain. Yeah, the gut, the body brain.
Right.
And the mind brain being the logical, the thinking brain. The heart brain, as Inga already pointed out, has something to do with feeling, with connecting to other people. And the body brain has to do with the functioning of the body and survival.
Mm-hmm.
We know that in the Institute, we differentiate between the right side, the paternal side, and the left side, the maternal side. So we actually
In
have,
most cases, not always,
in most
but
cases,
yeah.
yes. So the right side of my mind brain is basically my male mind brain. The left side, and I hope this is not left and right mixed up here with Zoom, so we'll see about that. So that's here my left side.
Yeah.
It's actually my left side of my head. That's the left mind brain. So that's my mother's, my female side. The right side of my heart, okay, is my male heart brain, and the left side of my heart is my female heart brain. Then we differentiate the body brain into some more. So above the navel and below the heart brain, on the right side is the solar plexus brain, and the left side is the solar plexus brain, also a pair brain. Then the navel, okay, that's the placenta brain. And then below the navel and above the pubic bone, on the right side is the male body brain, and on the left side there's the female body brain. And between the legs there's the perineum brain. And then we have missed the third eye brain. Okay, that's here between my eyes, and the spine brain. Yeah, these are unpaired brains. So they're single brain. They don't have a left or right side. And the spine brain goes on the back of my back, left and right of my spine. And then we have the crown brain. above, and it's paired again. Okay, there's a right side and there's a left side. So if you've counted, these are 14 brains, and each of these brains have different different tasks to do, and depending on how much trauma they experience during their prenatal phase and then the postnatal phase, they can be either black, dark, or what we also call evil, so not very positive, or they can be light, which we call good. Yeah.
Okay.
And with trauma healing, basically we can address these traumas, and there are certain techniques to do this. And then even we can move a dark brain that has a very negative perspective on life to light. Okay.
Okay.
That's Inka. Would you like to add something there?
Yeah, that was already a bit of the advanced course here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
but in everyday life, you can see that these brains have their own agendas. Yeah, Daniel mentioned that they have their own tasks, like they have a job description. I think we made it clear. Okay, your mind brain, the decision making, analytical, logical side of you, and the heart brain, the emotional side of you. Now, in somebody where these brains function seamlessly, that's all one unit, and you think the same way that you feel about something. Yeah. Now, if you have those brains not very well connected, not to mention all the other kinds of damage they could have, but let's just say they're not well connected, then they do not have the same idea about the same things, and you permanently have decision fatigue because this wants something here and this wants something there, and then there's the body brain that says no, I want something else again, and your whole day is like, what do I do? And depending on which brain you identify with in any given moment, you do one thing and you do another thing, and sometimes you don't even know what to do at all.
Yeah.
And now you have an explanation for somebody who's always going left and right and right and left, and you think like, why can't they make up their mind? Well, because they switch. Okay, they switch their identity with the brain basically, and they go one moment they go with the heart brain on the right side, and the other moment with the heart brain on the left side. And so from the outside, it looks like this person has no direction, and actually that person doesn't have a direction because he or she is torn between their awarenesses. And what I mentioned at the beginning, when we say we have to sleep on it, that's basically one moment when all these brains, when our mind is shut off, and all these brains might have a chance to communicate. And that's why we wake up, and then we have the idea, and then we know what to do, because then basically 2 or 3 or like 50% of these brains have come to a conclusion and say, oh, now I know. Okay. But if they haven't, if they like 10% want to go there, 10% want to go there, then you wake up and you don't have a decision.
Gotcha. So are you would you guys say that when you're talking about these brains, technically that's what we're talking about when we're talking about our consciousness? They're just these superimposed brains on each other that create our us, what we experience?
Yeah, they're a good deal of it. Yeah, there's all the brains of them. And then there is something that we call the directing self, which is the part of you that has intention.
Okay.
Yeah, and kind of like normally this is the part of you that would follow your purpose, maybe. Yeah, could put it like that. And then there's a part of awareness that's the perceiving part. We call that COA, or center of awareness, which is what you do when you try to perceive. When you move your awareness to different places in your body to figure out what's going on there. That's something that you do with your COA.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you pay attention with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
You shift your awareness to that place. It's really like a physical shifting it to another place. Some people can't do that, and that creates another weird sort of problem. but most people can do that and they find that quite normal,
Yeah.
to that extent that they're not even aware that they're doing it.
Yeah.
So
That
most
makes
people
sense.
haven't really figured out that those are actually different parts of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting idea that these are all different parts. And I can speak a little bit, and I'm sure you guys can too, but to that COA part, I feel like the more I practice it, a lot of these things are almost like skills. Like learning something, because I felt like initially I couldn't do it or I couldn't hold it. Before I started kind of working with you guys and just learning about trauma therapies and stuff, I remember reading a bit into like somatic experiencing, and just practicing that alone was very difficult, because like I would have I would have something come up like an uncomfortable experience, like I had some ugly sensation, and it was stronger than my will to keep my I don't know, my awareness in my right toe where there was no negative feeling or just comfort. Like I could do it for like a split second, and I think that's another part that's really, I think, important to understand. Or it's interesting that I didn't know a lot of these things are like skills you have to learn. And while that might sound like maybe some people like what, it's also very empowering, like you said earlier, because then I keep saying this, sometimes people will go to therapy to deal with something, and it can become a crutch, kind of like drugs can become a crutch. And then you just, whenever you feel bad, you go back, you're like, this is happening to me, like what's going on, what do I do? And so the option to take charge of this part of your life, to know that just like your body can heal by itself, you have some control over taking care of your own emotional well-being, far beyond what we are taught and far beyond what we know right now, in more, I wouldn't say mainstream, because there are trauma techniques out there that are already established, and they're followed by the psychiatric, the psychological community, and by therapists. But yeah, it's awesome. So it is kind of cool. It feels like a superpower when you're like, oh, I can do this now. I can hold it. I can put my awareness forever in my foot, or I can move it this way. It's super cool. I lost my phone.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but yeah,
we're actually not trained. Yeah, it's really like you're learning to walk. You know, you've got all the parts, but you don't know how to use them. So
yeah, yes, yeah. It can be a little tricky, but it's good to have it's good to have people who know what they're doing teach you. So that's makes it easier. I think there's maybe just one more question. I don't know if I asked this one. Let me see.
is the person who wanted to know about the brain still with us? Were they happy with the answers?
Yes, I got a feedback on the chat, in the Facebook chat, and I got a thumbs up. So
Okay, great.
I think we've talked about this one, but this I think this is an interesting topic because it deals deeper into ideas like complex PTSD, as a way we can classify it so that people who might listen know what we're talking about. And I think one of the aspects of complex PTSD is like this insidious, like day to day, you know, events that happen that shape, distort, warp, affect how you feel. And in these situations, if you read any of the literature, when we talk about complex PTSD, one thing that comes up is the idea of abandonment. And that's tough for some people because it's a form of abuse that's a lack, right? It's not like there was something added that shouldn't have been there. It's not like you were told negative things, or whether in the womb you felt something negative. It's more like we still have a lot of people who deal with an estranged like mother or father, and so the question comes, I think, from a perspective of that, not necessarily with a mother or father. I don't know, but I will ask it with that in mind, and it is, what do you do about the feeling of an emptiness, gap, or longing for what you never had? Uh, this example is a little different. Someone with abusive parents never having had a normal childhood with loving parents. So yeah, I feel like maybe you guys disagree or see it differently, but we talk about trauma, but then we're also talking about things that we learn as we grow up outside of, just like these intrinsic, like natural behaviors, but things that our parents teach us. And that can go a little bit beyond trauma, I think, in the sense that they're more like behaviors or feeling loved, feeling supported. Um, yeah, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that it's as simple as healing, just heal those emptiness, gap, loving feelings, or what happens to that person who doesn't know what love feels like, or who only knows these negative feelings?
Um, I think first of all, you really need to address that longing that was mentioned. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like the person is obviously longing for that feeling of being loved.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that points towards like probably a long-term neglect.
Yeah.
So we do have our own technique for that kind of. There's something that I want, and I've been looking for it all my life. I didn't get it from where I would expect to get it with my parents.
Yeah.
But basically, I've been recreating that with everyone, and there's actually no way on earth that that longing can ever be satisfied because it needed to be satisfied when it was the appropriate moment in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so no amount of loving will help that person because they don't have the receptor for it, basically. Yeah, they
Mm-hmm.
don't even notice it. Yeah. So there is a special technique that we're using for that. Um, the other thing is if you're missing something and you're literally feeling that as an area of your body outline that's missing, that would be a different case, and that's actually fairly simple to deal with. Far reaching in its consequences and can help somebody who's been really suffering, but the technique itself isn't all that complicated.
Do you mind explaining that a little bit more?
Well,
Like
it's
they
kind of,
feel like they feel something in their body?
Well, let me just put it,
yeah.
just put it this way. One of the big differences between the peak states therapy and traditional psychotherapy is that we don't necessarily need to look into the biography so much. Okay, we just work with emotions and we work with bodily sensations. Sometimes we use situations and so on, but it's not that that's not in so much in the focus. It's much more um, emotionally based and the sensation based. And so if a person can already feel, oh, there is something like a void, there's some emptiness or something inside of me, that means that there is a body feeling that there's a good connection, that the person can read whatever happens in the body. And then there's several techniques and there's several cases identified, and they're also published in a therapist handbook from the institute, and the therapist then with that client will, through asking questions, determine which kind of special case that is, and then apply the appropriate technique to resolve that special case. But when the person already feels that there's an emptiness or a void or whatever, something like this, that is a very, very good position to start. Some people just say, "Oh, my life is shitty," and that's it. And there's no sensation for the emotion, like this longing what the person wrote in the question, or something. They're just completely unhappy, and that's it. But
Mm-hmm.
if you can already say, okay, I'm longing for love, and it feels like an emptiness in my whatever. Let's take the heart area, and then there are certain questions the therapist will ask to differentiate which case it is, and then apply these simple tapping techniques again,
Mm-hmm.
some visualizations with it. And yes, there will be some emotions, some sensations will come up when we do this. Okay, So it's not completely like a painkiller and then you are numb. No, you will experience something, and you might call that resistance, or some people say, oh, there's a loading or whatever they might call it, and tapping gets rid of it and then gets rid of the problem in most cases.
Okay.
Yeah, the art is all in the diagnosing here.
Got it.
Yeah,
Of
once you
course, of
figured
course.
out what to do and you can give the instructions, then it's fairly easy for the client.
So, can you talk a little bit more about this technique when somebody feels like they don't have that? You call it like a receptor when they're feeling love, but they just don't feel like it's enough, like they're getting it.
Well, I can't obviously give here the instructions for self-healing.
Sure.
Yeah, we can't do that. That would just not be a good idea, because we don't know in what place everybody is who's listening here.
Yeah, of
But what
course.
I can tell you is that it is something that um, the sense of always being in lack, because that's like my natural state of being almost. Yeah, that is this type of trauma, and unless you know how to let go of it, you will it will be running your life, basically, to be running after somebody who can finally fill that lack. Yeah. And
Hmm.
because in development we have certain phases where we are receptive to certain stimuli, right?
Hmm.
For example, when you learn to speak, usually it's what 2 years old
I
time,
think so.
roughly, if I remember. Yeah, a child will just naturally exhibit that tendency to imitate sounds, and they will want to, it will want to engage with other people, and blah, 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 and actually we do have the response as grown-ups, and we start saying the most inane stuff like dootsy 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 and all this kind of things to a child. We it's a natural response to basically how we start teaching the child how to speak. Yeah,
Yeah.
but try to do the same thing to a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 10-year-old child that for some reason or other has missed its developmental moment to learn how to speak, and you get serious problems because it just doesn't click. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's why it's so difficult to learn a language when you're older. Yeah.
Yeah,
The
of
further
course.
away you are from that moment of receptivity, the more difficult it gets, I guess. Yeah.
But so you're saying that
and
even though
and that goes for that was just an example,
right,
or
it's
an
an
analog.
analogy.
So yeah, analogy. I think that goes the same for this kind of sense of what it means to feel safe and loved and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if that wound is there, you will carry it until you find a technique how to let go of it.
And so that you're
Yeah.
saying this technique helps with that wound or helps heal it like
Yeah.
okay. Interesting. That's
So
great.
afterwards that emotion is gone, life perspective has changed, and we know when it's done because you feel calm, peaceful, and light. Okay,
Of course.
Yeah.
regarding
And your
And
life
love.
is not determined by that incessant search. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. I think that's a great answer for that. Did I just ask this question? I feel like there's two questions that are the exact same. I'm trying to see if yeah, somebody asked that question, and then the last question someone asked was uh they asked where can they asked well here's another question. Where can I find this podcast?
here.
I think you put the answer there already, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I
Okay,
did.
great.
So for anybody who doesn't know, this is our number 9 and you can find us under Daniel's um YouTube, um, and you will find the last 8 sessions that we've done, the last 8 podcasts that we've done regarding all these topics on YouTube. And Daniel, do you mind spelling your last name so that people know how to look for it?
Yes, it's Daniel and then Zeiss, Zeiss.
Zeiss.
Yeah,
Okay,
and that's on
perfect.
YouTube, and usually YouTube finds that very quickly.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's one of the first ones, if not the first one. Yeah, the
Well,
last.
we could also put it up under transformation here. Might be a bit easier for
That's
those
true.
who
Yeah.
are not
Last
familiar
question we
with the
got
German spelling.
was the same thing. How do you handle feeling unwanted, undervalued, and unloved? Is there a way to get rid of these feelings? They're pretty similar, but they might have some differences. Um, Unwanted, undervalued, and
Yeah.
unloved.
Okay. So as a therapist, you develop a bit of an ear here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm hearing here is it seems there have been people who did that. Yeah.
Correct.
And when you have that dynamic again, then I would be looking for a projection first. All the
Okay.
people who didn't love me, all the people who didn't want me, is what I'm projecting out there. Yeah. And then I'm stuck in this opposite victim place of nobody wants me, nobody loves me. Yeah. And
Okay.
if you
And
bring the projection back to you, you love yourself. And here's the clutch: when you hear that and you listen to it only from your mind brain, you think you can solve this by thinking, and that's exactly what does not work.
no.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is why you're probably saying, "Oh shit! Then I just have to love myself." So many people have told me how to do that. I need to do that, and it just doesn't work. That's all a load of crap. So you need to know how to feel it and how to integrate it and become a whole again, like WHOLE, not HOLE. Okay, big difference.
So we've talked about this. You guys have a projection technique because
Correct.
it's not always the easiest thing for everybody to be like, "Oh, I'm just projecting." Like, yeah,
No.
most people we do. I mean, we do it, and we just know it's them. Like it's not me at all. This is all on them. So
that's exactly how to diagnose it, by the way.
yeah, of
If
course.
you're 100% sure that really these people need to change, it's got nothing to do with me. Yep,
Yeah,
that's
of
what it
course.
is. One of the things. Yeah.
Okay. And there's an emotion inside of me when I'm doing this that I don't want to feel. Okay.
Yeah.
And one way to escape that feeling of me, which is inside of me, in my belly, in my head, somewhere in my back, is to just tell them off. And then I don't have to feel it anymore. Or it's not mine, it's them. So I separate myself from my feeling. I'm not getting whole, as Inka pointed out, but I'm separating myself. I'm not integrating, but I'm getting pieces. And then again, I have some problems with these pieces because they might develop a mind of their own. And so one diagnosing, as Inka pointed out, is if I'm saying they have to change. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It might be true. There might be a fact that they need to change. But first, if I feel that and strong, I have to look at myself as well. And once I heal that, my perspective becomes different. And there's no way on earth that the mind brain can perceive now how it will be in the future after healing. That the mind brain simply can't do that.
Right.
It's impossible. And then you just do the work and then reevaluate the situation. Okay, our mind brain loves to take things from the past, project it into the future, and then say, okay, that's the path. That's how life is going to go. And if you're really true to yourself, truthful to yourself, then you know that very rarely happens this way, how our mind brain does it. But we still do it. Okay. And if in science you would have an instrument working that imprecise as our mind brains in predicting the future, you would throw it out. Yeah. And you would try to create a new one. But our mind brain does it, trying to help us cope with our emotions. And yeah. And that is, yeah. That's one way of understanding people.
Yeah, of course. Wow. Um, I usually don't. When you guys give those answers, I usually don't know what to say. But like, yeah, I mean, that's very interesting. Very, very detailed responses, and I think we got to all the questions here. If we have a few more minutes, there's a couple more questions I had for you that are related to. I feel like we're touching on all these issues that people might encounter that are pretty common, and there's one that came up today that I have in my head, and I think we can talk about it, which is, you know, most people are not dealing with just one thing. Most people might even be feeling crappy, like you said, and they don't know why. And it could be more than one thing. It could be that they're feeling, grief here and, anger here and da da da. And I don't know. They don't know what's going on. Um, what do you people do when they're coming to you and they're doing these techniques that are like, okay, you got to focus on one thing, but you got a whole bunch of shit going on. Like, how are you supposed to? It's not very easy to focus on just one thing when you're feeling a lot of things in your body. So, are you able to work with people who are feeling a lot of things? Is it more complicated? What can people do if that's going on with them? Anyone?
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, I'm always a bit in a bit of a dilemma here on obviously like we could give you all the text of how to do and what to do, and that would work maybe for the person who asked the questions, but
Sure,
you don't know what happens with all the other people who might be listening and who do not
of
have the
course.
right um, system or even the right knowledge and skills to do what we tell them to do, because like we talked, you have to train that muscle. If you don't know how to use it, it becomes really difficult and you can actually get yourself
Yeah,
into
you're gonna hurt
trouble.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
my
it's like an
intention is
aspirin.
never.
It might help you against the headache, but if you accidentally take it when you already are using a blood thinner or something, it's not indicated.
Yeah,
And we can't really say that from where we are here now and remotely uh,
of course.
not
And just
knowing
to
who's going
clarify,
to do what with this
just to
knowledge. Yeah.
clarify, yeah, my intention when I ask these questions is,
Hmm.
for everyone listening, is not for you to like, get the like knowledge right here. This is for educational purposes. This is to have a discussion. This is to answer questions that people are, have and are dealing with. And you guys are therapists. You guys have been doing this for a long time. You have a lot of experience. You've done work on yourselves, and it's educational, guys and gals. Anybody listening, again, for you guys, it's not my intention for you guys to just like, yeah, so this is what you do. You just da, 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 da. No, it's basically for anybody who might encounter this to be like, is there something that you guys can you work on with people who are dealing with these issues? Is that common? Not necessarily to share right here
Oh,
and there, what do you do, but
no.
can you work with these issues and stuff like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it happens to quite a number of people. And I actually just looked it up. There is something that I can recommend here. There is a guy called Eugene Gentlin, and
Hmm.
he had a couple of very smart ideas. And one of them is called the space clearing technique. And I've just checked, it seems to be on YouTube. Even now, I can't vouch for the quality of what's shown there. I haven't checked that yet, but this is
Hmm.
something that probably could be a simple way for someone to get themselves out of a momentary overwhelm of too much going on at the same time.
Hmm.
Or
Okay.
as a different thing, and is the loving yourself meditation or exercise. I have made a YouTube video for that. You just follow along, just do the visualizations, and then try to calm yourself, and then try to contact a therapist helping you further.
Okay. Perfect. Um, I think that was one of the main questions that I had. Um, I I feel like people ask some wonderful questions, are very personal stuff. And
Yes.
I want to say to everyone on Reddit, if once I post this and if you have the time, you took the time to watch all this, we hope it was helpful. And thank you. Thank you for putting your issues a bit out there, and seeking to improve your life, to understand yourself a little better. And that's all the questions I have. So I want to thank you guys. Is there anything else that you guys might want to add?
No, thanks, Sergio. I think it was a wonderful idea to ask people on Reddit about this. I love the questions. I love to be able to help and yeah, inspire a little bit of hope. And yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for moderating again our
Yeah.
ninth chat, this time on the webinar. And we got 3 visitors on Facebook and some in the chat. So yeah,
Nice.
there's already
Awesome.
some.
Yeah, that's great. Happy to
Okay.
hear that.
Oh, and well, they could leave a few more questions that we can deal with next time.
Yeah,
Of
if
course.
you have questions, lay them on the chat. I don't know if here or on Facebook.
On
So
Facebook, on YouTube, wherever, we'll try to
yeah,
pick them up. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, well, guys, that's it from my part. Thank you so much, Inka, Daniel. It's always a pleasure, and
Thank you.
yeah, I hope we have some great conversations like always for the next chat.
Right.
Thank you. See
Okay.
you. Bye.
Thanks very much. See you next time.
Bye, all.
Bye-bye.
Take care.